and ranchers. They're just top notch. So I'm really excited. Sorry, I'm gonna pop back in there. Okay, really excited. So how an agent kind of works is, and it's different for each area, is that we have our main primary goals. So I am a livestock agent. I work primarily with livestock. I have secondary responsibilities to the different communities based on different evaluations and conversations and stakeholder groups. So my additional specialties are in sustainable agriculture or agroecology. And then I have a strong focus in the organic and native seed industry. And then a lot of small farm ranch support, plant identification and botany for farmers and ranchers, vegetation ecology on ag lands. And then I am a disabled veteran. So I work with veteran and disabled farmer and rancher support. I am an ecologist previously, and I currently carry that into my work, and a botanist. I focus heavily in native plants of Arizona and the Colorado Plateau. I have a bachelor's in forest ecology and management and rangeland ecology from University of Nevada, Reno, and a master's in ecological restoration from Colorado State University. 8 years in the Army National Guard and Army Reserves. And if you're in the military, I was a 91 Juliet, which is a quartermaster in chemical equipment repair specialist. Unfortunately, I was injured, so I did have to leave after my 8 years, which broke my heart, but it helped me grow. Farmer at Double T Bar Farm, which is my farm. I raise goats, herbs, and duck eggs. And then I am also a Southwestern native plant and seed specialist farmer for Silver Creek Native Plants, which is kind of my other business. I'm a contract seed grower and foundational seed specialist. So I'm going to jump right in with the definition of a farm. And I get this a lot because we talk about small scale urban, and I get a lot of pushback because people are saying, hey, my farm is not 1,000 acres, 500 acres, 200 acres, 40 acres. And based on USDA definition, a farm is defined as $1,000 sold of agriculture products. So if you have sold $1,000 worth of product, you are considered a farmer in the eyes of USDA. This ties in though to IRS Schedule Fs and all kinds of different things. But I just want to make the point when we're talking about this and you see the size of my farm and talking about seed production, a lot of people will say, well, you're not a real farmer if you don't have X amount of acres or this particular equipment or this, that, or the other. And that is absolutely incorrect. So $1,000 of agricultural products. There is a typology. So there's a breakdown of that. So you can have residential farms or resident farms, intermediate and commercial farms. So there is that breakdown in there. But again, be careful with how you allow people to identify you and your farm and your farming abilities based on these numbers. Okay, so about my farm and how this ties into it is because what I do at my farm ties a lot into how I work with a lot of my producers and my stakeholders. One of the reasons that I have tied agriculture so closely into the community is because I was able to carry over my agriculture work into my current work and bring in a lot of my stakeholders. So I only have 1.8 acres and I only work 1 acre of it. That's intentional. I want it to be manageable for me and I don't want to take on any employees. My farm is located on the site of a former homestead and it is just part of one cornfield. So I have a lot of compaction issues and previous issues from what was there before. My native soil, or what soil that we came with, is three levels. So I have a clay silty sand mix. Then I have this crazy mid-level one that just solidifies to almost cement-like after anything rainy. And then I have my deepest layer is like a clay rock mix with like a lot of petrified wood and some really cool sandstones. I always use a cover crop mix because it's very windy here, and I do light tilling to help break up some of the clay. I build compost with horse manure, goat manure, bedding, spent hay, and it's all mixed by our tractor. And then we add water to make sure it gets heated to appropriate to kill Bermuda grass and any pathogens. My soil pH is between 7 and 7.5. I maintain it there. And then my farm and garden areas are divided into 5 acres, ranging from a 10 by 100 to a 1/4 acre. And so I have 2 1/4 acre sections in on the area, and that is grazed by goats. And then I have goat friendly cover crops on there. This is some of the stuff I grow. These are my favorites. So sorghum, I do dual purpose. So it has to have more than one purpose. So sorghum, I do sweetener, seed, and grain, floral, native plants, seeds, heirloom short season cotton, amaranth, arid alkaline tolerant veggies, and culinary medicinal herbs. So I started out with a vegetable production farmers market model and moved to seed and nursery plants with supplemental veg production. So I had like farm boxes that I would kind of sell. Then I jumped back into farmers markets. And then when I joined Extension, I've managed to just downsize to, I grow herbs for 5 specific herbalists, and they tell me what they want. I grow those out. And then seeds for specific projects. When I was selling at the farmers market, I could average 300 to 500 per market in high season when selling full time. I fully embrace limited financial input. My greenhouse is not going to be the prettiest thing on the planet. It's the picture off to the side. It is literally made up of cattle panels, 2x4s, and I wrap it in plastic in the winter and shade cloth in the summer. And I have like cost me $250, and me maintaining it as someone that has some disabilities is it's so easy. So and it costs me literally $70 in plastic a month if needed. That would be per year. And then I do small scale production and arid tolerant plants. So that leaves me more time for family and hobbies, and it leaves more for profit. I am beyond organic in quotes because I can't use any chemicals due to some of my disabilities. I can't really, I understand like everything's made of chemicals, but we're talking, some different, even organic based chemicals. So everything has to be kind of as natural as possible. But I also lose a ton of crops. So there's that give and take where I don't put a lot on my crops, but I also lose a large amount of them. So I overplant a lot of times, or I do multiple plantings of things. And then all seed that I have grown on site is now for special projects or contracts. And my favorite project is as a farm partner for native seed search. I used to sell seed, but the logistics is so difficult, and we'll talk about that in a second. And this is my brand new doeling Sierra that we're keeping on the farm. She's just so cute. I had to share a picture of her. Okay, so the process of seeds, maybe some people may be aware of this, and if not, so you're going to start with your seeds from an original source contract. So for me, this was one of the projects I did for a community grant with Native Seed Search. So we're growing the Hopi purple string bean, which if you've ever had it, the green beans are fantastic. They're so easy to grow, and they're the best tasting green beans that I've ever had in my life. And sorry if you hear my puppy in the background, she's protesting being in her crate. So I start with a seed source. And so if I'm growing native plants, it's something I may have harvested. There's a lot of different ways. So you start with your seed source and you plant your seeds. So that's pretty obvious, but then you're going to grow out. So you'll hear that a lot. You're going to grow out seeds. So you're going to not eat the green beans, and you're going to grow out this crop. And this particular crop has the most beautiful flowers, and they're great for pollinators. They're very arid tolerant. So then you harvest the crop when it's ready. In this case, I did have to harvest before the pods were dry due to we had an upcoming significant weather events and freezes, and I don't want to lose this crop. So I did pull it. You can see I had 2 massive containers and the close up of the beans. They're just such pretty beans. I took them back to my farm and I just spread them out on a table, and then I turned them 3 times a day until the pods were dry. So like 2-3 weeks. And then my final product is this beautiful bean. It's just gorgeous. And then we were able to donate, I think, I don't know, the Hopi purple was 5 pounds, and then I did cowpeas and Hopi limas and temporary beans and a whole bunch of different things. So we donated about 20-30 pounds of seed this year from the Holbrook Garden and my farm through Cooperative Extension and my farm. And here's just some Hopi red dye amaranth seed. Same thing, and I have a whole thing on this. It's extensive, but you grow it. And amaranth, you're going to want to catch those seeds before the seeds fall. because otherwise you'll have amaranth forever and it never goes away. Then I thresh it and then I clean the seed. And again, edible leaf, edible seed, and then the dye is also, it can be used as a dye and then also for seed. I'm going to mute myself for a quick second. Apologies. Okay. So now basic seed 101, we're talking about, and this is all just entry level. So there's so much behind it. There's some different types of seed. You have your agricultural, which will be like your forage based or grains or things like that. You'll have vegetable and specialty. And sometimes you'll have flower seed as an additional kind of type. Sometimes it's actually built into specialty. It just depends on what group you're talking to. And then you'll have additional types, and I'll put those in air quotes. So you're gonna have perennial versus organic, or annual, excuse me, organic versus non-organic, hybrid, heirloom, like genetically modified, protected, landrace, open pollinated, controlled pollinated, etc. And so with these types, they're actually more descriptors or kind of how the process of the seed was grown. So here's just a quick flow chart. So you're gonna take your initial seed, whether it be from breeding, wild selection, or other source. And then you can either go two ways. One, then you can have that seed go to a foundational seed breeding. So what you're looking at is you're going to take a very small amount of seed that was developed for a purpose, whether it be physically developed or whether it was, taken from nature or some sort of source. And the foundational breeding, which is kind of what I specialize in, they take that seed and they will grow it to a point where there's enough seed to be able to give to farmers to grow out for production. But what foundational seed breeding looks at is they look at the finite details of how that seed is going to perform. Is it meeting the standards of what that particular fruit or vegetable or grain should look like, different things like that. So very, very focused on a particular output. And then you can go to field trials from foundational seed breeding. Sometimes people don't. I prefer field trials because you just want to have that consistency. And consistency is a requirement for certification. And this is all super complex. So we're just starting at 101. If you don't do foundational seed breeding, then you go straight to field trials, and then you actually will send that seed to farmers to grow out to large production amounts, and then that goes to your markets and your distribution centers. So that's kind of how, in a generality, it's an oversimplification, it works. So there's basic seed 101 is really hard because there's things you have to know if you're working with seed. So the Plant Variety Protection Act, which is the PVPA or the PVA, depending on who you talk to, that is one piece that requires you to understand kind of the background. And I'm just touching on these for time. Then the United States Patent Trademark Office also has plant patents and utility patents that you need to understand. And then organic producers, if you're growing organic, you need organic seeds unless it's not commercially available. So there's another layer. And then the last one is we're going to genetically modified seeds. And I think most people do understand the definition. But we're going to address the elephant in the room because it's the one that comes up the most when we're talking about GMOs. So in the United States, there's actually not a lot of GMO crops that are available. So there's a lot of our food comes from and uses come from GMOs. However, most of it does come from, the amount. So if you're looking at like soybeans, 94% of all soybeans planted are genetically modified. However, that does not mean all of our food has GMOs. And I think a lot of people are going to say, they have a view whether they're good or they're bad. It's kind of at this point in time, it's not necessarily something that home gardeners or home farmers are going to get. So when genetically modified seeds are sold, there's contracts, there's research. Those companies have investments that are protected. So they're not going to just give that information away to the home gardener, to the home farmer. There's a lot of work that goes behind seed breeding that is not actually coming to the surface for just the average farmer. So there's a protection, and it's business, and it is also a as well as business and it's research protection. There's a lot built into it. So you're not going to go into a store and buy the $1.50 pack of seeds that's going to be genetically modified at this time. So again, this is a packed subject. We're just talking about it as far as, for a short overview. So some seed industry issues in Arizona right now that I found in my research, and I only have four minutes, so I'm going to get through this. So there's limited information on the annual revenue to state agriculture industry. So there is some information like so many millions of dollars came into the seed industry in Arizona, but it just doesn't know where it comes from. It does require additional study, which is one of my projects. There are some really great advisory stakeholder and oversight groups, such as Arizona Crop Improvement Association and the Seed Trade Association of Arizona. There are permits required by Arizona Department of Agriculture for seed labeler and seed dealer. And Arizona follows federal seed regulations, and there is a new seed rule coming out from Arizona with, there's gonna be a public meeting on April 12th. And so that can be reviewed at the State of Arizona site. So why is seed production good for small farms? A limited footprint is actually a good thing. So it's easier to have quality control, manage weed pressure, insect disease issues. And it is also more common to have a specialty or stick with a few variety for farms. So you get really good at one thing. Inputs are less, so we use less to actually do this because of smaller footprint. It's easier to keep hands on the entire process. If you are a control freak or you are OCD and you need to be part of that, it is easier on a small scale. And everyone will always need seed, and small farm produces seeds is a niche opportunity. It's a niche market opportunity. So why it's challenging is cross-pollination potentials limit number of varieties that can be grown. So you cannot be like, I'm going to be the queen of peppers or the king of peppers and have 20 different peppers on your farm unless you have a large space to be able to separate those. Seed cleaning equipment access can be limited or prohibitively expensive for small scale farms. I clean by hand and I pick through, and when I do germination testing and send it to the labs, I always have to make sure that my seed is as clean as physically possible because there are germination requirements and noxious seed requirements in your seed. So it can be really, really limited. It's limited to small contracts. It's really hard to increase production without increasing land size, and can be difficult to get contracts or have financially viable contracts due to the limitation of growing space. It can be hard to get into a market or a niche as compared to larger seed growers or companies. Timeline for plant care is longer for growing for market. The biggest thing I want to hit on is when you're a market farmer, you pick your produce at a set time to take it to market when it's going to be viable for your consumer. People eat with their eyes. Seed is different. You carry that fruit longer, you carry that vegetable longer, you carry everything longer. So you have more time that it's going to be insect issues, weather damage, disease, anything like that. So it's a longer time. And then a lack of understanding by the general public as to how seeds are grown or produced and how that translates to price in the market. I hear so often, I can't pay $5 for 25 tomato seeds. It's like, that is all the research put into that particular thing to make that a viable product, and that germinates for you and all that good stuff. So you're actually paying for quality over quantity. Lettuce, okay. So some potential markets: direct to consumer, contract with seed companies, bulk or wholesale, like co-ops, like Snake River Seed Co-op in Oregon. And then here's some different things. So I have a Pahrump cotton up here and a scarlet runner beans that we've had. The Pahrump cotton is an heirloom from Pahrump, and this was grown up by the border, and we use it for specialty fiber artists. They want some specialty things that you can't get from like a normal cotton. So breaking it down, your seed farmer, there's three players, if you will: your seed farmer, your seed labeler, your seed dealer. Two of those require labels, or excuse me, two of those require permits. And the farmer really has no legal oversight other than to follow good agricultural practices, phytosanitary practices, disease and pest issues, things like that. And then you need to know your state and federal requirements. USDA has, NRCS has this awesome guide to understanding seed labels and for seeding certification. Federal Seed Act has all the information you could need, in addition and more. There's Code of Federal Regulations on USDA sites that you can look at. Arizona has a seed crop. site. So there is all your information, and all you just need to do is sit down and read through it and kind of figure out how this is going to relate to your farm. And then managing expectations. I'm out of time. Okay, it's not much. Okay, so I'm just saying it's not fast and easy. You need to know what you're doing. You need to work with people. You need to work in a community. Okay.
Thank you so much. And we will have time at the end for an open Q&A. So I saw some people putting questions in the chat. I love that. Please continue to drop your questions in the chat and we'll get to them in an open Q&A at the end. Thank you so much, Anita. I'm now so excited to introduce Rachel and Patty to speak about local food for schools.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm going to jump right in because I know we're all trying to get things very in a very tight time constraint. So I'm going to share my screen here, but I am going to pop off of a video as well because I feel like my internet is also a little dicey today. So let me share my screen. So Patty and I are the co-chairs of production and procurement for the Arizona Farm to School Network. And we also bring other work experience into this world. I have about 12 years of experience as a school food nutrition professional, garden educator, wellness coordinator, and Patty has extensive experience working with local growers. And so we in our work group with the Arizona Farm to School Network are trying to make those connections between producers and schools who are interested in giving our Arizona kids opportunities to explore local food. So that's kind of where we are today. That's sort of what we're bringing to the table. I wanted to first highlight for you the Purchase Local AZ website. As you may have heard, there is a large amount of federal funding that is coming into our state through LFPA, LFS, you may hear that, but both of those funding streams are being managed under this umbrella of Purchase Local AZ. So if you are a producer that would like to figure out if there are opportunities to expand your market channels into food banks or maybe some CSA style food boxes, or maybe into schools, this is going to be your first stop. There is a producer intake form that you'll want to fill out, and then within a week or two, you will receive contact from someone with Purchase Local AZ, and then we can kind of take the conversation from there. There's also a community partner interest survey. So if you are providing food for, say, a local food bank or something like that, that is another opportunity to engage with this program, having your community partners fill out the interest survey. So I just wanted to highlight that. PurchaseLocalAZ.org is the website there. And a school-based interest form is on its way. So when we're talking about, in particular, schools, if you are interested in having your produce going into a nearby school, there's going to be some things to think about. I know that the world of like school nutrition can feel a little mysterious and unknown if you're not in it. It can get really jargony, and there's so many layers of regulations and rules and limitations. And I think sometimes it can feel really daunting to even step into that space. But what I wanted to just highlight here is that there are different opportunities to engage with schools around local food, with bringing your produce into the school. There's school meal programs. So that would be your school breakfast or your national school lunch program. There's fresh fruit and vegetable program, which some schools are eligible to apply for this grant where they provide their students, and this is in elementary schools only. And the students receive a fresh fruit or vegetable snack outside of their meal programs every day. And there's nutrition education that goes along with that. It's a fantastic program. And we'll talk a little bit later, but I think that's a fantastic entry point for growers to engage with schools. And then there's also these one-time kind of special events. Maybe it might be a taste test, or it could be a farm to school family night that we did for several years before, when I was in my school setting, where we would invite farmers out and we would try some local produce, and the farmer would get to share about their farm and, you know, about their food and all of that. So I will say that, like with school meal programs, as you can see there, there's lots of rigid requirements. There's a lot of budgetary constraints for schools, whereas FFVP has that more of that flexibility. And I think for those one-time special options, that's such a great way to start building a relationship. It might be something that the schools would be interested in around maybe October, Farm to School Month, to get kids and families curious about local food in their area. And so here is what I was saying here, offer versus serve. I'm not going to go too far into the weeds with this, but if you are working with a school that, excuse me, is doing maybe a lunch program, there's ways that they don't have to offer like quite as large of an amount of a particular food item. And so that's just some conversation, just some background awareness that there are different rules to meal programs. Salad bars are a great way to have like maybe smaller quantities of fruits and vegetables going into these programs. So finding schools that have salad bar programs would be something really advisable. And then again, for FFVP, the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program, and food demos. If you have some willingness to take that extra step and maybe come out to the school site or support with nutrition education, that kind of thing, that really helps. This is just some considerations that schools are going to take into account as they are looking to add new vendors to their purchasing. So I just have this as an awareness that there's going to be questions about when can I order, how does it come delivered? You know, schools are going to try to find as simplified a process for ordering, distribution, delivery, those kinds of things. And so being aware that school food managers are juggling many things all at once, as are growers, of course. Just that awareness that if you come prepared with answers to some of these questions, that will be helpful. In those conversations. Food safety. All schools have different levels of risk, adverse, there are different levels of being adverse to risk, I should say. So they may not all require, certain specifications, but one thing that they're going to want to know is, do you have a food safety plan that's written? Are you able to quickly, talk about food safety measures in your various processes? Again, I don't want to get too far in the weeds here, but I wanted to point out here with this cost proportion and give you awareness that most schools are looking to have a fruit or a vegetable portion that costs less than 50 cents per portion, because the reimbursement rate that schools receive for their whole meal is quite limited. And so just that awareness that your schools are trying really hard to be innovative and give kids lots of exciting, fun, healthy, fresh foods, but they have very little money to do that. Some product specs. So schools are going to ask probably for specific types of food, because they need to know how their kitchens are going to interact and process this food. So by asking a school for some specifications, here's an example with broccoli: firm, compact heads and crowns. And they're fresh and they're free from damage. their apples, there's going to be certain count to a case because schools need to be able to plan for, if I order this case of apples, let's say, or it might be carrots or whatever, I need to know the size of them because we have certain guidelines that we have to meet for portioning to serve our students. So just some awareness about what schools are going to be thinking about as they're trying to order. And engage in these conversations with producers. And so that kind of leads us to conversation about costing your crops when you are planning on engaging in the school market. And I'm going to pass this over to Patty.
Thanks, Rachel. And I'm off as well, just to kind of preserve the bandwidth of the internet too. So, but thank you all for being here. And I'm just going to start out on this portion and talk briefly about a presentation that Rachel and I hosted last month within our community of practice within Farm to School. Each month we are, and Rachel will talk a little bit about this before we close out the program, but each month we host just a different panel or speakers that are bringing information to the table that will help assist in understanding this journey of getting local food into schools. And we had two individuals that joined us last month. One was a division chief of markets with the Department of Ag out of Pennsylvania. And another one was the founder of a company called Kitchen Table Consultants. And what they did was they presented a crop costing tool along with just an overview of the importance of budgeting for your overall business. And I know many of you might already be doing this, and that's great. We also have people that are new coming into farming, and we just want to continue to have these conversations around the importance of really having a firm understanding of what it costs you to grow your crop, and then also having that business budget in place. And over the just the course of several years of talking to individuals, whether it be producers or it is our school food service professionals that are procuring products, what we have found is that pricing is a real big challenge. It's a challenge for both sides of the equation because, as Rachel briefly mentioned in the slide before, there are cost constraints in what the schools are allowed to spend, and those costs are pretty low. We're working on trying to get that changed. We're working on different methods of assisting that. And when I say we, it's a collective we, not just Rachel and I. This is something I think nationally that is being looked at. But again, it is what it is right now. And then when we have local food trying to come into the schools, we're seeing a big chasm between what the local, the cost that is being charged up against the cost of what schools can afford to pay. So how do we get closer together in that? So that was one reason. And then the second reason, which was something that really stood out in last month's conversation, was, if you are not measuring what it is that you're doing, so if you don't have a real clear understanding of what your costs are, you don't have a clear understanding of your overall business budget, it's really hard to manage. And as producers, we all can certainly talk about the challenges that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. There are so many variables that we have to juggle that are out of our control. So having that clear understanding is super important. It allows you to be nimble and to be able to react and be able to change things. It highlights areas where maybe you could do something better. Or it highlights areas where your spending may be jumping up, and then you can figure out why is that spend jumping up. But if you don't have visibility on it, it's really hard to tell that. So when we talk about pricing, we have the wholesale pricing, versus kind of market pricing. And I think when we're all going out and we're selling product, whether it be through a CSA platform, direct to consumer, to within farmers markets, those are all kind of what we term as market pricing. And then you have wholesale pricing, which is pricing that's different, that is directed more towards, for all sense and purpose of our communication, our conversation here today with farm to school, that would be considered a wholesale market. And there's a couple things that we look at with these different markets and how it impacts the ability for you to price those two customers differently. When we look at wholesale, a lot of times you're selling in a bigger lot. So there are going to be cost savings just because you're selling more food. And those cost savings can be realized through labor. So let's take, for example, Rachel and I were talking about this the other day where, somebody is selling, they want to sell ground beef into a school and they're packing it in a 1 pound pack. And that's how they're selling it, because that's how they're moving it into the farmers markets, to their CSA, direct to consumer. So you think about, if you're packing each individual 1 pound pack, that's going to be a lot more labor than putting that into, like, say, a 10 pound pack or a 20 pound pack. Your materials are also reduced down. So there's a cost savings there. There's also risk mitigation. And when we talk about the risk mitigation, it's understanding what you're growing before you plant. So you've got, whether it is a commitment or a hard contract, you understand that before you're putting product into the ground. And that's important because, the farmer, the producer is carrying a lot of the risk, if not all of it, by putting everything into the ground. And if something happens, it doesn't sell, there's a weather event, any number of things, and you lose that crop, that's your loss. It's not anybody else's loss. So having contracts in place and having having those types of frameworks also help with risk mitigation, because you're planting to what it is that you're going to sell. And then there's also the concept of efficiency of scale. So if you have a really nice transparent view of what it's costing you to grow, you can really start looking at crop mixes. You can look at, okay, you know what? I know growing lettuce is a lot cheaper than growing carrots for a number of different reasons. Maybe you get more turns in the ground with it. Maybe your labor to pick that and pack that is cheaper. Again, these are things that come into view when you have a really good understanding of all the costs that are involved in growing a crop. And so then you can start playing around with, okay, you know what? I know that I would like to access the school. I understand the school market. I understand their pricing is more sensitive. Here's a way that I know that I can grow something and it doesn't cost as much, or it would make sense to move it into the school and really look at how I can come to them with more of a wholesale pricing model. So those are a couple of things that we look at there. And then just very quickly on budgets, if you aren't doing an overall budget for your business, that's another thing that's really important. Budgets can be overwhelming if you haven't done them before, because you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know how much it's going to cost me to do this, or I don't know how much I'm going to sell. The thing is to understand that when we put a budget in place, that budget is dynamic. And what you do is you're basically just laying out a guesstimated roadmap. And some of those costs you probably have a firm understanding on. And then there's going to be others that you're just going to kind of have to take a wag at. And but then what you do is you put that budget in place, and then you start tracking, and you track your actuals against your forecasted numbers. And then at the end of a season, you can look at, okay, where was I off? How can I plan better for next year? So these tools really just give you the opportunity to look at how do you create a crop mix that you're maximizing your profit margins on your crop mix. You're also, when you're making purchase decisions, if you're going to bring a new crop on, it allows you to have the visibility to look at, is that something that I can handle right now? How can I allocate that spend out and make sure that I'm not going into the red? And then it also helps you to decide what new market opportunities that you can then slide into. So this was just super top level. But if you have any questions, we'll be around for the Q&A, and we're happy to answer them at that point. And I'm going to turn it back over to Rachel.
Thanks, Patty. I know we're out of time. I just wanted to share really quickly that we have monthly production procurement work group. It used to be called work group. Now it's community of practice meetings. And so I wanted to highlight the one, our next one is in April 12th, 2 to 3:30 p.m. And we're going to have a discussion panel from food service professionals around the state, Tucson up to Prescott, who have participated in something called the Farm Fresh Challenge, which is a leaning in to local food purchasing for schools on a one-time kind of special basis. And I mentioned that, there's kind of like maybe a taste test or, these like easy kind of entry points. And Farm Fresh Challenge is something that comes around every October. And then we also have Summer Challenge as well too. And so anyway, you're going to hear from some of the school food professionals who participated in last October's challenge and kind of hear about how they were successful in completing that challenge. And it might spark some curiosities for you about ways that you might be able to engage with your local schools for this upcoming fall Farm Fresh Challenge. And so there's the QR code. Actually, sorry, that is the membership form. If you wanted to get alerts for all things Arizona Farm to School Network, you'll want to fill out that membership form. And then I'll drop in the chat here in just a minute the registration link for the for this particular community of practice work group. And that's it. I'm going to stop sharing. And I just say too that there's so many good reasons to work with your local schools. I know it can sound super daunting. I feel like maybe it's a kind of this like heavy kind of conversation, but there's nothing more rewarding than seeing kids learn about where their food is coming from. And we are growing future consumers too. So if we have kids that care about their local food system, their local growers, the nutritional value, the freshness of their food when they're young, they're going to grow into adults who value those things. So.
Thank you so much, Rachel and Patty. I'm just going to take a moment now for our survey. So if everyone could please scan the QR code or click on that link, this just helps our program create the best opportunities to give you what you want to see for the Urban Ag Hours, which are, our new monthly event in cooperation with NRCS. So thank you all so much. Again, if you could use the link in the chat or the QR code, we'd really appreciate hearing from you all about what you'd like to see more of, how this event impacted you. And now we can go to an open Q&A. I know we had some questions in the chat. So Tony, if you wouldn't mind just taking that off, we can go to gallery view. And if anyone has questions, please unmute yourself. Now is time for us to chat together, and Anita, Rachel, Patty can all answer questions. I know Anita, Emily Heller asked, what is the name of the green bean variety that you shared?
It is Hopi Purple, and the original source is Native Seed Search out of Tucson. There's other seed companies that carry it. I tend to stay with the original source on that one.
Great, thank you so much. And I have another question for you, Anita, around solutions regarding control of weeds in the organic farming process.
So caveat, I am not an organic researcher. I am a producer that I have to wear gloves when I touch compost or packaged materials or anything that could have something that could set off, some sort of, I have a blood disease. And so I just can't have it like on a farm. So I'm not a researcher, but what I will say, and so wearing my extension hat is that, and from an ecological perspective, if you have open space, Mother Nature does not like open space. It will put something there, whether you want it there or not. So when you're doing weed control, what I have found, and like the literature is, you're going to want to remove, right? You're going to want to take that away to increase production and reduce competition. What I found as a producer is that from a market perspective is that some of the weeds out there that are growing on my land, they are actually have a value to them. So when I'm looking at that, as I look at a secondary market, I'm anti-amaranth, Palmer's amaranth and some of the weedy amaranths because they cross with my amaranth that I want, but at the same time, there's a market for that. So I just try to look at it from a different perspective. I hand pull, I use cover crops. I basically do the whole 9 yards that research has suggested. So again, that's just from a producer. From an extension standpoint, I just think it's something that we're gonna have to continue to work because it's producer specific. And what they have time for, what they have capability for, and what the word organic actually means to them as a producer.
Thank you so much, Anita. I have a question from Paul in the chat for Rachel and Patty here. So do schools want to do farm tours, and how would one go about doing that?
I'm so glad you asked that question. Yes, it's a fantastic way to maybe make some great introductions. And a slide that I didn't have time to show is talking about like building trust and communication and all that kind of thing when you're looking at making these procurement relationships. Bringing kids out to your farm is fantastic. I will say that schools do not have a budget often for those kinds of experiences. So I would consider the potential for very low, minimal cost farm tours, if that's something that works within your budget, I guess. Just thinking of it as perhaps an investment in a relationship. Not to say that schools wouldn't have some budget for that, but I know that some like farms that offer farm tours or kind of farm experiences, like my school never had the budget to go do those experiences. So yeah, so I would say research your local school districts. I also put my email in here, and I would love to, I think that it would be fun to build out a resource list for schools of farms that might be interested in hosting students at their sites. So if you can send me your information, that would be great. And then we can kind of hold on to that. And then especially around October is National Farm to School Month. I should have kind of prefaced that. So schools are often trying to come up with really fun ways to celebrate that month. And so, yeah, so maybe we can pull together a list of farms that would be interested in having students out, for sure.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any more questions for our speakers today? Just drop them in the chat or feel free to unmute yourself and ask any questions that you might have.
Colleen, this is Patty. While we're waiting on any other questions to roll in, I just wanted to kind of tag on what Rachel said in regards to the opportunity for trust building. And this is another topic that we talk quite a bit about within Farm to School. And I think it's applicable, across all markets. But it's so important to have that communication and to build that relationship. And a lot of times we're like, we'll hear from procurement folks like, well, what does the farmer have? And then the farmer's like, well, what do you want us to grow? And we kind of like get stuck with this, like this middle area of where those two questions are not like making it to one another. And so the importance of really picking up the phone and talking, and I think a lot of that when you start looking at contracts or soft contracts, and we call those commitments, that's where you can really start having those conversations and talking about, learning about some of the challenges from a pricing standpoint. And that's where those innovative solutions happen. So they can't happen if we aren't having those conversations. So again, just want to really reinforce the importance of communication and building a relationship and trust, and how that will really gain a lot and go a long way for both sides.
Thank you, Patty. Yeah, that's a great point. And we do have another question in the chat. This goes for all of the speakers today. What about bonding and insurance for either seed growing or selling produce to either market or schools? What does that process look like?
I can start because it's a simple answer. There's really nothing as far as that I found in any research that would be requiring bonding or insurance for the process. That being said, the bonding and insurance is built into the process of having seed through following all the appropriate state and federal regulations to produce and sell seed, both internationally through the states and in state.
And I'll speak to the school piece of that. Every school district, just like with the food safety requirements, every school district is going to have their own requirements. I would imagine that they, especially the bigger districts, are probably going to want to know what your insurance coverage is, just because of the potential for, foodborne illness or, any of that kind of thing. And so I think you just would have to be prepared to provide that information if it is asked. I don't know a whole lot more, just because every school has its own pinch points about what they require from their vendors. I will say that most schools do purchase from like a Shamrock and a Stern, like very big distribution channels and networks that are highly bonded and insured. So for these kind of smaller, maybe one-off kind of vendor relationships, there might be some wiggle room, but it might be something that they might ask for.
Thank you, Rachel. Well, thank you everyone for bearing with, internet troubles with weather and coming out to listen to our fabulous speakers today. Thank you to Rachel, Patty, and Anita for taking the time to be here with us. I am going to flash the survey QR code and link one more time on the screen, which really helps us to produce the best programming we can for you all. We also will have our next Urban Ag Hour in April. And we'll drop the links for those in the chat. Or I haven't made the link yet, but we will have on our Eventbrite page that posted, and I'll send it out via email. And we do have our Urban Ag Field Day, which is going to be April 27th in person in Avondale. So we can drop that link in the chat for folks to register. It'll be at the Coldwater Co-op, and we'll allow for some in-person time together. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming out. And yeah, please take our survey and let us know what you want to see next month.
Thanks, Colleen, for doing this. This is amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you all so much for coming and participating. It was great, both great talks. So.
Colleen, did you want us to hang on for a few minutes?
I think that everyone is signing off now. So yeah,
I
we
just didn't know
can-
if you wanted to debrief on anything.
yeah. Let's see. Folks are signing off. We can debrief now. Just want to say thank you again so much. And Patty, it was just such a pleasant surprise to have your expertise join on. And yeah, it was a really, really good talk. I think even with the weather, we still had a really good turnout. So
Yeah,
I
it
was
was
honestly
great.
not sure with the I know our Wi-Fi is down here, so I wasn't sure who could make it. And yeah, thank you all. Well, I
Anita,
think
thank you. I really enjoyed listening to your presentation as well.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you guys. I appreciate that. You guys were amazing. I'm really excited to see what, to work with you guys in the future, because that's something that's needed up here for sure.
Well, absolutely. Yeah, Rachel and I would be more than happy to, keep those lines of communication going. And Rachel is, Rachel, what is your formal title? Since it's new, I don't have it committed to memory.
It's currently it's local food for schools coordinator. So it might shift and change a little bit, but basically
Okay.
kind of school and institution, like education institution based work.
Okay. And that's Anita, that's with Pinnacle Prevention. So Rachel
Okay.
just started there. And I was previously with Duncan Family Farms for 13 years. And I just made a job change, and I am going to be starting at Local First in a week. And I'll be their director for resilient food systems. So definitely would like to keep in touch with you as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. That would be great. I would love that.
Okay.
And
Cool.
Anita, I'm thinking I'm putting my